Welcome to another edition of You and Me and Multiple Sclerosis. Well, in my last video, I talked about Epstein-Barr virus and the consensus that's slowly coming together in the medical community that Epstein-Barr virus is a necessary but not sufficient cause of multiple sclerosis. So in other words, it's very unlikely that you will be diagnosed eventually with multiple sclerosis if you have never had Epstein-Barr, if you've never been exposed to it, if you don't have the antibodies in your bloodstream. On the other hand, you can have Epstein-Barr virus antibodies and not be diagnosed with MS. In other words, it is necessary, but it is not sufficient. There are other factors, genetic and other lifestyle factors, that may well be part of the MS formula, as it were. And this is largely based on a study, a massive study that was done using people that were enlisted in the United States Army. And this took place over multiple years and involved people of all different ethnic groups, women as well as men. But one thing that it didn't do is look at young children. And I got to thinking, all right, well, regrettably, there are more cases of multiple sclerosis in young children than ever before. And I don't know if it's because diagnostic methods are more sensitive than they used to be, or if it truly is more prevalent than it used to be. Either way, it's pretty sad. But I got to thinking, all right, if Epstein-Barr is necessary for multiple sclerosis, are we then saying that these children are positive for exposure to Epstein-Barr? So I looked at a bunch of different sources to get some idea of whether that might be true. And I'm just going to step you through some excerpts from articles, websites that I looked up to try and figure out if it really is true that Epstein-Barr is necessary for multiple sclerosis to occur. So according to the Atlas of MS, an estimated 2.8 million people around the world have MS, and that number grew from 2.3 million in 2013. The majority of the 2.8 million people that are diagnosed with MS are adults. However, roughly 30,000 people living with MS are under the age of 18. And again, according to an article in Multiple Sclerosis Journal back in December of 2020, the onset of MS typically occurs between the ages of 20 and 50, and the average age which someone is diagnosed is 32. Now that's kind of what we're familiar with, but according to this article that I found, which was published in WebMD in November of 2021, of the 400,000 diagnosed cases of MS in the United States, 8,000 to 10,000 are in people younger than age 18. Neurologists think that there are probably many more kids with multiple sclerosis that haven't been diagnosed. In the National Multiple Sclerosis Society, on its website, which is always updated, so I don't have an exact date, but it's been updated as of 2022, they go on to flesh out this a little bit more. They say less than 5,000 children and teens are living with multiple sclerosis in the United States, and less than 10,000 worldwide. But diagnosing MS in children is more challenging than in adults because of other childhood disorders with similar symptoms and characteristics. And that's understandable. Kids present with lots of different symptoms, and those are likely to be attributed to things other than multiple sclerosis. Certainly at that young age, that would be likely. And they go on to say that MS in children is not that different from MS in adults. Children with MS exclusively have a relapsing remitting course, which means there are clear attacks of symptoms that subside. So during the periods of remission between attacks, there is no progression of the disease, and that even though children may experience frequent relapses, and possibly more than adults get, studies have shown that children also seem to have very good recovery that is often more rapid than that of adults. And that's probably why, or one reason why, it's difficult to diagnose MS in children, because the symptoms seem to come and go so easily and quickly compared to the typical course of MS, even in a young adult. But what about Epstein-Barr and pediatric MS? Well, here's a few things that I found. In an article in Very Well Health, they say that research suggests that the Epstein-Barr virus is associated more strongly with pediatric MS than with adult MS. Well, that was pretty interesting. So, of course, I clicked on that link because I wanted to find out what research they were talking about. And here it is. Here's the article that I found. The incidence of Epstein-Barr virus positive diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, a systematic review and meta-analysis. And what they had to say was that Epstein-Barr virus infection is common and affects the majority of individuals worldwide. The primary infection usually takes place during childhood, and then the virus undergoes a latency phase without causing any symptoms. So that was new. I hadn't realized that. Children apparently are more prone to being infected with EBV than adults. It's just that when you're a child and you get it, you don't have the same symptom course that you get when you're an adult. And again, another article that was published in April of 2021 tells us that in the United States, the EBV seroprevalence, so the prevalence of antibodies in the bloodstream, for children and adolescents between the ages of 6 to 19 is about 66.5%. And in relation to this, I found a table in a presentation from Can Do MS on pediatric onset multiple sclerosis. And there's just a chart here that shows the age at onset of multiple sclerosis. And as you can see, there's some, but not very much, before puberty, basically. And then once you hit 12, 13, it really starts to go up, and it goes up fairly quickly, which is kind of suggestive, isn't it? That there's something possibly about the hormonal changes that happen to a person when they hit puberty that does something to hasten the onset of multiple sclerosis. And then later on in that same presentation, they talk about Epstein-Barr as a possible trigger or cause of multiple sclerosis in children. They remind us that Epstein-Barr is part of the herpes group of viruses. And it's not herpes, but it's related. And one way it's related is that once you get it, it's in your system forevermore, whether you know that it's there or not, whether you have symptoms or not, it's always there and can flare up or cause other problems. And at least 90% of people are infected by adulthood because it's incredibly common and incredibly contagious. And as they say here, it's often asymptomatic in young children. So young children don't have any symptoms, or if they do, the symptoms could easily be mistaken for some other illness or ailment that a young child might likely get. And finally, infectious mononucleosis in 40 to 50% if acquired later in childhood or adolescence. So that's sort of typical, right? We think of mono as the kissing disease, and that's usually people of dating age get that kind of thing. But young children don't present with mono, even if they are infected with Epstein-Barr, which does make the whole diagnostic thing difficult. But it is pretty obvious that by the time people are old enough to have MS, they're also old enough to have been exposed to Epstein-Barr virus. And then this article from Very Well Health had some interesting things to say. And it was published in May of 2021. And they say when someone is first infected with EBV in childhood, they usually have no symptoms, or they may have nonspecific symptoms. At one point, your child may randomly run a fever, which could be due to EBV or one of many other childhood illnesses. Interestingly, this infection is most aggressive during the late adolescent and young adult years, 15 to 24. At least 1 in 4 Epstein-Barr infections at this age will cause problematic symptoms. When an EBV infection becomes problematic, it's often called infectious mononucleosis. So that's all things that other articles have hinted at all the way along or mentioned, but this one was good because it more or less put it all together for us. Well, that's all thought-provoking. It certainly does seem that Epstein-Barr is a lot more prevalent in children than I had actually thought, because as it turns out, young children often don't show any symptoms, so we don't see the mono or the other kinds of symptoms that we see in young adults when they become infected with Epstein-Barr virus. I think there's still a lot of research that needs to be done. We haven't quite got all the answers yet. It's very, very promising. As I said in my earlier video, we now know that Epstein-Barr plays a hugely important role, and if there were a vaccine to prevent getting Epstein-Barr virus, it might actually be a cure for multiple sclerosis, which is incredibly exciting. But I don't know that we're quite ready for that yet. As I said, lots of research is still going on. But as I learn new things, I will keep you posted. But that's all I have for you today. Thank you for watching. Take really good care of yourself, and I'll see you again in my next video.